Welcome to Overcoming Physician Burnout as Health Architects, a series in which we talk about different ways that physicians can approach their clinical work to make it more rewarding and fulfilling. This is Venkatesh Ramnath.
Today's episode 28, The Architecture of Communication, a Health Architect's Framework. If you prefer reading, I invite you to look at the written post, which also includes embedded links for references. Also a disclosure. I have no conflicts of interest or disclosures regarding the products cited. In previous episodes, I talked about how medicine normalized saying yes. Then I explained the necessary achievable skill of saying no while still building trust. In the next few episodes, I'm going to use it as a springboard to share other techniques within the rubric of effective communication. These strategies will help you interact with different people throughout your workday, whether in the clinic or the hospital. In particular, I'll go through different ways of communicating with the following individuals. Physician peers, especially when we disagree or have a conflict. Patients and families, especially when it comes to end-of-life conversations where the stakes are often the highest. Non-physician clinical staff, like nurses, dietitians, pharmacists, and so on, as part of our multidisciplinary team. And finally, administrators, executives, and other non-clinical members of the broader healthcare team. But before we get started, we must remember some basic foundational concepts about effective communication. First, effective communication does not take a single predetermined form, any more than all patients present with one form of clinical shock or heart failure or respond the same way to an antibiotic. Each situation is unique and needs to be treated as such. The uniqueness of communication derives from a fundamental appreciation that every individual is unique in this world. You're probably thinking, of course, I know that everybody's different. But humor me for a moment. Let's remember where our uniqueness comes from. Each one of us is a singular combination of inherited ancestry, biology, society, culture, and a host of other factors. Effective communication asks us to feel this truth and not just acknowledge its presence in passing. None of us would challenge that no two patients are the same, a truism that inculcates us from the first days of medical school. But we also need to internalize the fact that no two doctors are the same, no two respiratory therapists are the same, and no two administrators are the same, and incorporate this feeling into our participatory knowledge as physicians. Now, with the uniqueness of individuals also comes the need to recognize our individual boundaries as well. Once we realize that each one of us is unique, coming from a special set of circumstances that explains who we are and how we got to this moment, we can then see how we have gaps that separate us. In this regard, one concept I have found helpful is one that the writer and poet David Whyte puts forth in his book, What to Remember When Waking, when he explains how we have a sort of frontier existence between what is going on within our unique selves and what is happening in the larger world around us, which includes other people. It is in trying to traverse this boundary space that the magic of communication, what Whyte calls a conversation with reality, can take place. Health architects communicate effectively with others because they understand how to exist and move within this frontier space. They see that no one person or circumstance is the same as another, and they recognize that real communication must reflect, respect, and bridge these gaps. They also know that to do so, they must enter the frontier space with courage, since it often lies beyond one's immediate comfort zone. Health architects know this involves letting their guard down at times and opening themselves up to a certain type of vulnerability, since it takes humility to acknowledge that we don't know it all. It takes patience when someone else doesn't react or respond as we expected. And it takes curiosity about what we can learn from the differences that confront us. Taking a step out of our comfort zone by appreciating our individual uniqueness with vulnerability, humility, patience, and curiosity is an important step for the health architect in the pursuit of effective communication. A second essential point is that communication is a living, breathing dynamic. When I used to communicate with others, whether nurses, administrators, or peers, I always had a preconceived notion of what was going to happen and how, as if the process were fixed and predictable. As a health architect, however, I now hold a different view. Even though those with whom I interact do share some common purpose with me, because why else would I be talking to them, I am attuned to their different standpoints that they bring in terms of background, personality traits, biology, behaviors, incentives, worldviews, emotions, and so on. All of this makes any interaction at least a bit unpredictable. Now, you might think that this unpredictability leads to unease and discomfort, and you'd be right. But uncertainty can also be exciting as well. Think about the last time you watched a mystery or a thriller when the suspense kept you from turning off the screen until you found out who the perpetrator was. The truth is that the unpredictable and organic nature of communication can lead to all kinds of emotions. Feelings of tension, ease, exasperation, and triumph can all take place during a single extended interaction. As a health architect, I don't shy away from conversations because I don't know what will happen, or fear of being on the defensive, or expect to be vindicated. Instead, I prepare myself to ride the waves and expect that the conversation will ebb and flow and twist and turn through various phases of emotions until its conclusion. Once I was accustomed to this mindset, I actually found myself subconsciously looking forward to the surprises that each interaction might bring. Finally, it's important to remember that effective communication is a learnable skill. When we become more aware of the unique differences between us and the ups and downs of the process itself, it can sometimes seem impossible to find a sense of grounding. We can feel adrift in a sea of uncertainty and what-ifs, with the land of competence far out of sight in the distance. But just as when you place your first central line or led a cardiac resuscitation as code leader, there's a learning curve, and it can be steep, especially at first. With time, you'll probably find, as I did, that effective communication is a procedural skill just like any other. It can be learned, and with practice comes perfection. That said, what I offer in this Substack should be considered a starting point, a template, a blueprint to which you should weave in your own special nuances and tweaks. Building architects sketch the essential elements, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, and the walls between them, before they add their artistic, expressive touch. Similarly, health architects master the basic structure of communication and then add their unique flourishes, thereby converting a bare transactional dialogue into creative, meaningful exchange. This is how ordinary communication is transformed into effective communication. And don't forget that the benefits of meaningful exchange are bidirectional, because with mastery comes a sense of fulfillment as well. In other words, we feel better when we communicate better. This is why effective communication has a special importance when it comes to overcoming burnout as health architects. Health architects experience effective communication less as a necessary chore, weighed down by what could go wrong, and more as a creative journey of learning, full of surprises and opportunities to feel empowered and more connected to others. Returning to David White, he writes in Chapter 5 of his book the following, quote, "There's a marvelous sense of joy that we can have in the act of learning. That is a terribly underrated quality, actually, that we are constantly commoditizing learning and seeing it always as a path to something else. But the joy of discovery of recontextualization can actually in itself recontextualize our identity to shape the identity of the learner, of the disciple, of the apprentice, of someone who is not cowed by the need to learn or humbled in the wrong way, but actually humbled, brought back to the ground of their true being, where they can actually stand on that ground and look the world directly in the eyes and stand in a kind of confidence." This is the kind of confidence that the health architect gains through effective communication. They augment their agency by looking directly at the world and connecting directly with others, all of which are essential to combat burnout. So let's take the 30,000-foot view. As noted earlier, health architects use a blueprint or frame to get started. So as a general rule, I follow this rubric. First, I prepare in advance. Remember to do your homework first. Know the players involved and the facts pertinent to the planned interaction. Would you walk into a board exam without studying first or understanding the format of the exam? I didn't think so. The same is true with effective communication. Second, I use a structured approach. Have a plan. In communication, don't expect everything to work out spontaneously or to see where things go. No credible surgeon would start cutting without thinking through the operative approach with his surgical team and performing a preoperative checklist, and no critical care physician worth her salt would intubate a high-risk patient without methodically assessing high-risk features and having a backup plan in case of difficulties. Why wouldn't you do the same when communicating in a high-stakes situation? Third, I engage in reflective curiosity. Think about what is working and why in the moment. After the conversation takes place, debrief with yourself and others to learn lessons for next time. These starting points may seem obvious at first, but in the moment, they actually may seem superfluous or dull or unnecessary. But resist those temptations. Stay on track and give it a go. And practice. When honed and incorporated as part of your participatory knowledge, that is, our lived experience, they can be extremely effective and fulfilling as part of our quest to retain agency and human connection as health architects. Take-home point. Effective communication is not a fixed script, but a learnable, dynamic skill rooted in recognizing each person's uniqueness and meeting them with humility, curiosity, and preparation. Health architects don't just react to conversations. They design them intentionally, using structure, reflection, and emotional awareness to build trust, strengthen teams, and restore meaning and connection in clinical work. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this episode. In the next one, we'll continue our discussion about effective communication by exploring how to talk to physician peers and give some examples to see how it works in practice. See you then.